Hello, passionate people. Welcome to episode number 5 of Passionate Talk. I am your host, Gary Karp, and on today's episode we have the second part of my conversation with Takara Shelor. Now, yesterday we talked to Takara about her being an empath, the difference between empathic ability and psychic ability and intuition. She also talked to us about her 4 noble C's and gave us 5 practical steps that we can use every day to develop our empathic ability and our intuitive ability. Today we're going to speak a little bit more about pendulums, and Takara is going to share with us how remembering a suppressed trauma opened up the doors to her intuitive development and her psychic development and really showed her her calling. She's going to share with us her first dolphin encounter and how she first discovered the story of Lolita the orca and what she did when she found out about this beautiful, beautiful story. She's going to tell us about her time living in the San Juan Islands and how she started the nonprofit organization for dolphins and for whales. She's also going to let us know a little bit about how her 9-to-5 job set the stage to help her in her calling moving forward and what she's doing today. So, right now, sit back, relax, grab a cup of coffee or some tea, and listen to the second half of my interview with Takara. Now, folks, I do just want to give you one caveat at the beginning of this conversation. We do talk about trauma, and it may not be suitable for work or for younger children. So if you're listening to this podcast at work, or if you are listening to it with kids in the car or at your house, you may want to take a moment, turn it off, and listen to it at a time when you're not at work. Or that I've played with it, but I've never used the pendulum for dowsing. I've always used it as a party trick, actually.
Right.
Because I discovered that gift or that talent or that ability, whatever you want to call it, at a very young age. And, you know, when you're 16, you're not thinking metaphysically or higher power. You're looking, wow, that's cool. Look what I can do.
Exactly. And it is cool. I mean, that is a very cool thing. The ability to bend reality or to move an object, it's just one step shy of realizing you can bend reality, that you can create the future you desire, that you do have some influence on the things around you. You're not just being buffeted around by the universe, but you actually are playing a conscious role with your mind. I mean, the whole idea is you're raising yourself up vibrationally. You're expanding in awareness and consciousness. And you are coming more into alignment and wholeness. It's a process. It is our human spiritual evolution. And it's a never-ending process. But once you've achieved some level of wholeness and balance, you become different and your whole life changes. There can be more fluidity. There can be greater synchronicity. You can decide you want something and it starts showing up faster. Mm-hmm. There's all kinds of things that can occur when you focus on growing spiritually and evolving that way.
So how did being an empath and the 4C technique that you just explained using the 5 tools, how did it change you? When did you start doing that practice? And how did you see your life changing? And where is it now because of this practice?
Again, one question with, we could talk for hours.
I'm sorry.
No, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. The way that it all began is that I was a frontline supervisor and engineer in the pharmaceutical manufacturing industry. I had 40 people that reported to me directly, and I was the only female manager in the entire manufacturing facility. So there was a lot of people looking at me. I was sort of in the limelight because of my position, and there was a lot of stress. Every decision that I made affected the bottom line of production for the whole facility for the day. So I, under all this stress, eventually literally hit the wall. I woke up one morning, I wasn't feeling well, I called in sick, and the next thing I know, I'm laying on the floor in the fetal position, remembering that I'd been raped.
Oh.
Yeah. So that's how things began. I went to work the next day early. My boss was also there early, thankfully. I walked in his room, his office. I closed the door and I told him what was happening, and I just said, I can't be here. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I cannot be here. Like I just, I was feeling all these feelings, and I don't know, I was a mess, basically. And he suggested that I go down to the nurse. She made an appointment for me to see a psychologist or psychiatrist. I can't remember which. But, somebody professional dealing with mental stuff. And I began a whole journey. I went to this psychiatrist person for a few visits. But it's almost like this magical thing happened because the rape happened 15 years prior to me remembering. Okay, so it was a suppressed memory that I had been successfully keeping at bay. I knew it happened, but I never dealt with it. I never felt angry. I never felt sad. I never was afraid. Nothing. I just closed it off. But now here it was spilling out everywhere, and I was feeling all these feelings that I had no idea how to handle. But just like I had put the lid on those feelings by suppressing this memory, I had also put the lid on my intuitive ability, which I didn't know. I mean, it was like a byproduct of, and none of this was conscious. This is the way I handled the event. We shut it down. Denial is a very powerful part of the mourning process, right? And I had just been in.
And everything the body does, even though it may seem negative to us, is for our protection.
Right.
Everything the mind does is for the same reason. Now, it had the consequence or secondary consequence of shutting yourself off from your emotions, from your intuition, that Eight of Swords moment.
Right. So as soon as the lid was off, I didn't take it off. The universe helped me, under a pressure cooker of stress at work, take the lid off, right? As I started dealing with the emotions and the memories and the flashes and all that, the flashbacks and all that, I suddenly had incredible intuition. And I would just know that I need to go here, or I just know that I need to read this book, or I just know. I mean, it was amazing. It was like a switch got flipped, and suddenly I knew things I needed to do, and I started doing them, So I started going to New Age bookstores for the first time in my life. I started having energy healing. I started doing lots of different things. And so some of the stuff that I told you in that list of 5 practices, they were things that I learned to do. I mean, the meditation piece, the sun salutation piece, I'm not sure about the dowsing, spending time in nature in silence. Those 3 things were what I did for myself, beginning almost immediately, to learn to handle the stress I was dealing with at work. They were what I needed to do to learn to cope with the massive stress I was under.
And so when you're now going through this process, your intuition has been blown off. The lid has come off. Your intuition is firing on a 5x5 basis right now.
Right.
How did you use that information to get you to I don't want to say a good place or a better place, but to get you to the place where you knew where your life mission was and where you knew what you wanted to do?
It's really interesting how life changed almost overnight. What happened is when I learned to meditate and I was listening to a guided meditation, like recorded on an audio, I was following along with whatever the person was saying that I should see. And all of a sudden what I started seeing were dolphins. So,
my spirit animal, actually.
Right. I didn't consciously call them in, but they showed up. And then they sort of took my life over. And that's a good thing, okay? But what happened is, from that moment forward, after the first, basically, I call it my first dolphin encounter. It wasn't in the wild, it wasn't in the water, it wasn't at a park, it was in a meditation, is how they showed up for me and blessed me and healed me, literally. So I'm meditating, minding my own business, following along like the dutiful little person listening to the audio, and the next thing I know, I'm surrounded by dolphins and dolphin healing energy. And it was like I was enveloped in this just exquisite loving, healing energy. And I was at first seeing them. And then in later meditations, because what happened is every time I closed my eyes to meditate, they would show up. I would see them, I would feel them. Like I said, they sort of took over. And that's not bad. It wasn't really a takeover. It was more like dolphin angels, because they're the angels of the sea, showed up in my life and they helped me heal from this deep, deep, deep wound. And their support was, it really made a difference for me. So in this process, I was able to feel them, like where I could literally feel like I was belly to belly with a dolphin, and it would be spinning me through the water like a torpedo. So obviously they're spinner dolphins. But as I would be spinning in my mind in a meditation, I would be crying and crying and crying. It was like it was shedding years of tears.
It was a release for you.
Huge, monumental release for me. And in the middle of all this going on, I'm still working. I'm still at the top of my game in my, career. I heard a story about an orca named Lolita. And Lolita, her name in the waters she's from is Tokite. She was captured in the Northwest off the state of Washington in the San Juan Islands and taken to Sea Aquarium Miami in Florida and had been there for over 20 years when I first heard her story. And as I heard this, it still makes me cry. When I heard the story of this beautiful, beautiful, magnificent creature being in captivity, being enslaved in that industry from the time she was 6, ripped away from her family in the Northwest, I sort of looked at it like, how would you feel if somebody came into your house and took your 6-year-old kid, It hit me on such a deep level that I got involved. I started telling people about it. I wrote about it in a newsletter I used to have. And the next thing you know, I literally quit my job in management in the pharmaceutical industry, and I moved to the San Juan Islands to be near her family and became a spokesperson for dolphins and whales, sort of an ambassador. And in that capacity, I began to write about dolphins and healing and all the things that I'd started learning for my own healing and evolution and coming back into wholeness for myself, and finding ultimately the bottom line for me at the time, and still what a lot of what I do is I help people find happiness and inner peace and meaning. And that all began with the dolphin showing up in meditation, me having gone through that horrific experience that, most would be, oh my God, it's the worst moment of your life. For me, it was actually the best moment of my life, because I got to see the truth. I got to heal things that were down there that were messing up things. I mean, my health was terrible. You can't suppress that many emotions and not have a physical ramifications of that.
Absolutely.
And so all these things started healing and improving, and life started taking a whole new turn. I started a nonprofit for dolphins and whales. I co-founded that with another person, and eventually I ended up in Southern California, where I ended up getting married, and I left the nonprofit and went on with other things. But ultimately, I went down a whole other road to become a writer and a speaker and a teacher, helping people ultimately find happiness. But those noble C's are really what I teach, and how I help people is to attain those things.
That is a wonderful, wonderful story. It's amazing how something that's really you don't think is going to connect, some little situation of the stresses in the job at the pharmaceutical, led you down the garden path in a spiritual, inspirational way, and ended up really being your life's calling, your true calling,
right,
that give people back their happiness, or in some cases, give them their happiness. I mean,
right.
It really is an inspirational thing for me to hear someone doing that work, and because it's a beautiful thing, and I think it's a very important thing that we need to do, to let people know they don't have to live a 9-to-5 cubicle job. Yes, we all need to make money, we all need to pay bills, but you can do what you love, and you can monetize it and make money at it and bring value to this world, whether it's through art, whether it's through helping other people find their passion and their calling. And it's really, really wonderful what you're doing.
Thank you. Well, what's really interesting is that not only, you brought up about how being in the pharmaceutical industry and going through stress, was the catalyst for what I'm doing now. But what's really interesting is part of what I did in that pharmaceutical company was part of the management that I did was in liquids manufacturing. So years and years later, one of the things my intuition had me begin to do was make flower essences. And eventually I was inspired. When I say inspired, what I'm talking about is divinely inspired. Like I was meditating and all this information came in and I felt like I needed to do this or that or the other thing. And I was inspired to infuse into flower essences and gem essences dolphin healing energy, because that same energy that came in to heal me, I now can radiate out to other people. Like I basically in the embodiment of that energy, and it radiates forth. And I can hold little bottles and infuse it into them and then send them off and be uplifting them that way. So I send these little blue bottles all across the world, but I'm manufacturing liquids manufacturing, just like I was back in the pharmaceutical industry. So I find it interesting that even that technical stuff that I did is now playing a role in my current what I do.
It's amazing how what we do before we wake up to what we're supposed to do always ties in to what we're supposed to do. It's sort of like preparatory work that we don't realize we're doing.
Absolutely. I mean, another example is one of the things, the dolphins and whales play a really big role. I have books on many other subjects, but this dolphin piece and orcas in particular, when I lived in the San Juans, I literally developed the ability to feel when they were present. I could be working in my office or doing anything at all, and suddenly I would stop everything and go, they're here. And I would jump in my car and I would drive like a maniac to the other side of the island, and I would scamper up to the top of a hill and I would watch orcas, like 30 of them or more, swimming past just as I arrived.
That's got to be an awesome sight. That really has to be an awesome sight.
Oh my gosh. It's nothing. I love dolphins. Don't get me wrong. They came and they rescued me, but it is orca that it's like they are my soul family. And when I see an orca breach, that means when they leap all the way out of the water, the word breach, that's what it means. And when you see an orca breach, I mean, it almost blows me backwards. It's so powerful and amazing. Never do I grow tired of it. It's something I miss greatly about no longer living in the San Juan Islands, because, it was so amazing. But what happened later in life is I was inspired one day to invite a bunch of dolphin and whale experts to co-author a book. A bunch of people said yes, some very famous people. It was an extraordinary adventure. But, I came up with the idea and I led the whole thing. And every one of my skills that I used when I had those 40 people reporting to me, my communication skills, my ability to manage projects, all that sort of thing, I had to utilize in order to bring that book together. And so once again, those skills were critical to what I do now.
It is
it's just
a
so
wonderful
amazing.
Story, and I really, literally could sit here and talk with you for hours, and I'd love to have you back, but I don't want to monopolize your time. I want to be very respectful of your time. Because literally, with the way you talk, with the passion you talk with, and of course dolphins are near and dear to my heart, near and dear to my soul, I could talk for hours. But what I'd like to do right now is just to give you an opportunity to talk about and plug whatever you're doing now. Tell people where they can get in touch with you, where they can buy your books, or anything else that you'd like to plug. Here's your opportunity just to let people know. Let people know who and what I do. My primary website is magnificentu.com. That's the word magnificent followed by the letter u.com. And when you go there, I've got hundreds of articles you can read about all sorts of topics, everything from how to do well on the internet to
dolphin energy healing and some very, very esoteric topics that I cover. There's also a link to my store, which has my best-selling books. It also has the dolphin-inspired flower and gem essence products I have called Dancing Dolphin Alchemical Synergies. And if you're interested in dowsing, the things that I was talking about earlier, I actually have an online course called Dowsing for Divine Direction. And that is found on the main website, not on the store. But I do a lot of things, and they're all on there.
Wonderful. And of course, is there any place else people can connect with you, be it Facebook, be it Twitter, be it YouTube?
I have been online for 20 years.
Wow.
I put up my first website in 1996. And since then, I've put up many websites, and so I have tons of social media and a lot of different websites. And so, I mean, there's pages and pages and pages. If you Google my name, it's like an encyclopedia. There's a lot of material, and, especially the free articles. I've been writing a newsletter since the year 2000, and I have thousands of subscribers from over 100 countries across the globe who read my newsletter every month. And so, there's a lot of material, and it's all still valid. Even though some of the articles were written maybe 15 years ago, it's still relevant today, some of the information that I write about.
Now, for our listeners who are out there, I know there are plenty of people who are out there facing their own challenges. They may have a toxic job situation as you did. They may be trying to develop their psychic ability, their intuition, or just become more spiritually aware. What's the one piece of advice you would give to these people?
Know that in this moment, you are in the exact perfect place that you're supposed to be in, doing exactly what it is that you need to do. And if you just take a few moments, maybe every single day, write in a journal or just take some time in silence, you will be guided from a very high, wonderfully loving place, the next actions to take and what it is that you need to evolve as an individual.
That is absolutely beautiful, and I find that advice to be more true than not. Takara, this has been a ton of fun for me. This has been one of the best conversations, and really, I am not kidding. Anytime you want to come back and talk about dolphins or these subjects, this has been one of my most fun conversations I've had since I've been doing this.
That's wonderful. Well, I am always thrilled to speak to interviewers, and I've loved spending the time with you. So anytime
that
you want me on,
was an incredible story. And I love the passion that Takara brings to it when she talks about dolphins and orcas and what they mean to her. On a personal note, I love dolphins. Dolphins has been my spirit animal ever since I was 6 or 7 years old, when the only dolphin I ever saw was Flipper on the old TV show. One of my greatest experiences in life was the opportunity that I had to swim with dolphins while attending a Tony Robbins seminar in Cancun, Mexico. It totally changed my view on life and the world. It was an incredible experience. And if you ever get the opportunity to do so, do not hesitate. Go and do it. I know that you can go to SeaWorld in Orlando, and they have a program where you can swim with dolphins. I would definitely take advantage of that. It is something that is truly, truly life-changing. I also love the fact that Takara talked a little bit about her corporate life and her 9-to-5 job folding in and becoming part of what she's doing now, what her calling is. And I think it's pretty amazing that what we do in our 9-to-5 life, what we do to pay the bills while we're searching for our calling, most often or not, comes back to aid us in that calling. The advice Takara gave us, that we are always in the right place at the right time for the universe to teach us our next lesson, for us to take that next step in the greatest creation of who we are going to be, is wonderful, wonderful advice. Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Takara. If you didn't have an opportunity to listen to part 1 of it, please go back and listen to yesterday's conversation. It is fantastic, and there's a lot of great advice that Takara gives. She goes on to explain her 4 Noble C's and the 5 practical steps that we can take to increase our intuitive ability and just have a better quality of life. She touched on that and referenced them in today's conversation. She goes more in depth in yesterday's conversation. So if you haven't already listened to that, please go back and listen to yesterday's conversation with Takara. It is wonderful. And Takara, I just want to let you know that I just signed up for your newsletter, and I am going to make sure that I read everything that's on your website. I love what you're doing, and I love a kinship that you have with the Dolphins. So, folks, that's all the time we have on today's episode of Passionate Talk. So, until tomorrow, follow your dreams and passions and manifest the life you choose.